What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we got a signature Barnhill Brothers deep dive coming your way. The first one we have ever done, if you can believe it, because it's been so long since he fought, on a Conor McGregor fight. So we're going to look at Conor versus Max from a striking, grappling, and intangibles perspective. We're going to dissect this fight top to bottom, talk about ways that both guys can win, interesting things that can happen depending on where the fight goes, and everything will be in the timestamps below. So if there's a particular part of this conversation you're looking for, you'll know where to find it. But Nick, we always start with striking, and let's be honest, I think this is going to be the meatier part of this conversation. I don't think that, well, maybe you think this is going to be some sort of grappling war, but I can't imagine so.
Not at all, sir.
But let's look at the striking aspect of this. So a couple of things stick out to me. We go back and we watch old fights.
Right.
With Conor, it's harder, right? You have to go back 5 years, and even still, to find more meaningful fights, you have to go back even further than that because he had the leg injury and things of that nature.
Sure.
So and we'll get to that in intangibles, but that's going to be the biggest thing for Conor is, we haven't seen a 37, almost 38-year-old Conor fight. We saw what would have been prime years Conor fighting. So we don't know who's going to enter the cage, but what we can go off of is what we know of Conor in the past, right? Conor got laser accuracy.
Yep.
He's got tremendous timing and power. He also was, in the beginning part of his career, landing like almost 3 significant shots per minute more than his opponents. Now that has come down significantly in his last few fights to where it's just, I think it's a little bit more than even. He's still got the edge, but not nearly almost 3 strikes per minute. And then he's coming up against an absolute output workhorse in Max Holloway, who's landed more significant strikes than anybody in the history of the organization, who's just a guy who doesn't take you out with one shot like Conor does. He beats you down with thousands of shots, right? It's like death by 1,000 cuts with Max blessed Holloway. So where do you see this thing happening as far as striking is concerned? Because I think we can all say that Conor's got the power advantage. If somebody is to land one single shot and get a KO, most likely Conor. If somebody's going to wear the other one down with volume, I think we can all pretty much say that's going to be Max. But there's some nuance there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Conor McGregor is a unique guy because we haven't seen him in all this time, and his style has evolved as he, started in the UFC, got to the belts, and then made his first return, which was a very boxing-heavy style. So we don't know exactly who's going to come into the cage and compete against Max Holloway. Now, Max's style has gotten a lot better and evolved, but it hasn't changed as drastically as Conor. So I'm really interested to see how both men, have been preparing for one another. Max Holloway understands that Conor's a very good starter. There's one thing we know is he's never been a late round guy. He's always a great starter. First round, second round, it usually goes Conor's way. And then he sort of gasses out. But most of the time on his way to the belts and things like that, he didn't need to go much further than 10 full minutes with somebody before he was able to find his, precise shot in the night. So I'm really interested to see how good Conor starts this fight, because if he starts the fight well, there could be a chance that being at 170 and fighting a guy who, even though he's known as Mr. Durable, Max Holloway isn't quite as durable as he once was, and he is naturally a 145er. Even when you think about his fight with Charles Oliveira at 155, he was landing shots and they weren't really phasing Charles Oliveira, and Charles isn't the best striker in the UFC, and everything Charles was landing seemed to be rocking Max Holloway. So I would venture to say that Conor McGregor, even after all these years off, is probably more of a power puncher than Charles Oliveira. So if he's able to utilize that bigger frame, 5 years off is bad for ring rust and things like that. But if he's strong and more physically commanding than a Max Holloway, and we saw Max Holloway have issues with the power of even a 155er in Charles Oliveira, I would assume that he might have some trouble with the power of Conor McGregor. Also, like you said, the laser pinpoint accuracy that he punches with, very high level. So I want to see how this fight plays out stylistically. Also, a thing that sticks out to me is Conor McGregor, we all know, is a southpaw, and he's very good at fighting southpaw. And there's just less left-handed people in the world than there are right-handed. So if you are a southpaw and you've been coming through a gym or you've been coming through the rankings, you're used to seeing ortho more than orthodox guys are used to seeing southpaws. Now, I'm sure Max Holloway has filled all of his training rounds lately with southpaw fighters and is looking at tactics from the open stance. But Conor McGregor has the experience in the open stance, and he's also really good with some of the primary tactics, like, for instance, doubling up with the power side, right? Whether that's you throw a jab up here to feel, and then you throw 2 times with the left hand, or you throw the left hand and then follow it with a left side kick. Those types of tactics are just simply not as used in a traditional orthodox versus orthodox fight. In open stance, it opens everything clearly to utilize that power hand and power side a lot more. So it's very interesting to think that Conor McGregor could come out here and rock Max Holloway early, but given the fact that he's open stance, he's really good at landing his precision power shots. He throws the backhand, which is his power hand, more than, he throws his jab, and he's more natural to 170 than a Max Holloway, and Max Holloway's slightly less durable. That makes me think that the first 2 rounds are going to be the most eye-opening rounds for this fight. Now, if Max can weather the storm, I think things are going to trend his way for sure, especially if we get into the championship rounds. But I'm really interested to see how Max Holloway utilizes stance switches, and then ultimately how he fights in the orthodox stance, because once we're in open stance, we know Conor McGregor is always able to find his primary weapons, which are his power punching, and he's even good with some wilder extracurricular style kicks, even with that back leg.
Yeah, to me, this is a total power versus volume fight.
Okay.
So Conor McGregor said in the interview with Ariel Helwani, look for me to actually have a little bit of a weight cut. And Ariel pressed him and said, well, how much are you going to cut? And he's like, well, how much are you weighing right now? And Conor didn't really want to get into the specifics, but if memory serves me, when Conor fought Nate Diaz, he was 168.4.
Okay.
And that means that the times he's fought at 170, he's never really cut weight to make that frame. Training camp alone kind of gets him below 170 without having to go through the sauna or the water loading or the diet manipulation with sodium and stuff like that. So this time he's saying it's going to be a little bit different. He's saying, I do have to attack this from the perspective of I'm going to do a weight cut, which means he's probably going to be significantly bigger as far as weight is concerned than Max come fight night, because Max can still make 145. Now, we know that didn't look great against Topuria when he went back down after winning the BMF, but he still made the weight.
Right.
There's no way in hell Conor could make 145.
No.
So,
and the only thing he'd come back to 155 for is a world title shot against Justin Gaethje. But if this doesn't go his way, he's for sure never going back to 155.
That's the only thing he would go back down for. And so, to me, it's like Conor's going to bring the power.
Right.
Now, Max Holloway, up until recently, I would say, is the most durable fighter in the UFC.
He had never been dropped, right?
Never been dropped until he got, I think Justin Gaethje should have been credited with a knockdown.
Yeah.
But either way, Ilia Topuria was the one that put his lights out for the first time in his career, and it was pretty clear. Charles Oliveira, as you mentioned, also was landing some pretty powerful shots, and Max at 155 seemed to have a little bit more trouble with the power there of an Oliveira.
Right.
And I'm not going to say Oliveira is not powerful, but Oliveira certainly can knock you out. But Conor McGregor, if you think about what Dustin Poirier said back when they fought, he was like, man, I could see, the boxing stance was a little bit different and he wasn't quite as fast as he was, but damn, when he hit me with that shot, man, I was like, this guy's still powerful as hell.
Oh, yeah. And he's got beautiful uppercuts. His head movement was still good. Even in the Dustin Poirier fights when he was losing, he lost both of those, but there were really good moments. And it's very cool to hear Dustin Poirier be open and honest. Like, man,
was buzzed. He buzzed. Dustin even, I think that was the word that Dustin used. I think he's like, Conor buzzed me in that fight. I think it was an overhand that he landed. And that's the thing about Conor too, is he's really beautiful with the timing. He understands range perception really well.
Yeah.
And so he can be close enough to where you think you can land a big shot on him. And then he gets just out of the thing about the Eddie Alvarez finishing sequence. One of my favorite finishing sequences in the history of finishing sequences in the UFC.
Maybe the best UFC performance of all time.
Maybe. And when you slow that down and you see just how Conor's deep understanding of distance and range management really is, you realize just how special of a striker he was. Now, is 38-year-old Conor going to be that? We don't know. But the other thing about that is his opponent in Max Holloway.
Right.
One, we know we already talked about how Max has extreme volume and very high accuracy himself. But the other thing about Max that's going to be problematic for Conor is his footwork. Max has got phenomenal footwork.
Oh,
and that's what I think, when you're fighting a southpaw, we always talk about that front foot battle. And Max can go southpaw too. Max can switch stances. But most of this fight, I think Max will be ortho and Conor will be southpaw. And Max will be mindful to move behind that jab and keep that front foot on the outside of Conor's front foot. Because what is the big, equalizer for an older Conor McGregor? It's that left hand.
Right.
Conor, especially now that Max has been knocked out, if Conor puts that left hand on Max Holloway with the right shot, it's, the fat lady's coming out to sing, so to speak.
Right.
So Max has to be very careful of that. And I think he will use good footwork to avoid the power, because you can negate the power hand if you're circling
to the weak side.
Yep. And then it puts Conor not in you would almost have to punch across your body with the power, which diminishes it. So I think there's so much to dissect here. I want to give the striking, advantage to Conor McGregor, but I just can't, because we haven't seen him in so long. I just don't know if he's going to be the same Conor McGregor with the accuracy and the speed and the precision. And while it's really close, I've seen Max look really good striking more recently than I've seen Conor look really good striking.
Sure.
So I just have to give the striking advantage to Max Holloway a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you agree or disagree?
So before I let you know who I'm giving the advantage on the feet to, I have to say one thing. It really does depend on the kicking ability from Conor McGregor and the choice to kick or not kick from Max Holloway. If Max starts to stab that knee, that oblique kick that he likes, where you jump in, you're landing right above the knee, Conor's going to wind up getting frustrated with that. And sometimes Conor does bring some pressure, lead leg heavy. He starts to try to walk you down. He also, in his later years, more recent fights, has been super bladed. And we saw Dustin Poirier really exploit that and start to chop that calf, and it really was affecting Conor. After about 3 or 4 landed, then he was starting to wobble, had the Bambi legs a little bit. So I want to see how much Max is willing to kick, because if Max is willing to kick, then I think he does slightly have an advantage on the feet. If he's not going to kick, and we don't really know, right? He was really confused when Charles Oliveira came out for the BMF fight and just started grappling, and I don't think that Max Oliveira. I don't think Max Holloway is going to come out there and just give Conor the exact fight he wants, right? I don't predict for you that he's going to go take Conor down and hold him down like Charles did to him, but I also don't see him just going out there and throwing hands with Conor McGregor. I think that would be a mistake from Max Holloway. So he's probably got to frustrate Conor, get him thinking and second guessing about his entries and the way he stands, because of his leg, right? We don't know the shape that his leg's in. It's got a steel rod in it. So if Max is able to do a lot of damage, it might hurt a little bit if you do land on that steel portion of the leg, but it could also wind up moving that steel plate around a little bit. So I don't know what Max is going to do. Is he going to try to kick a lot and use a lot of distance and range to avoid Conor, which is going to force Conor to come in, and that opens up your countering opportunities? Or is he going to go out there and try to give us the most exciting fight of all time, because Max Holloway's that kind of guy?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, I'm getting my shot to get back at Conor McGregor. He beat me like 13 years ago, but at the same time, I understand that this is the biggest fight the UFC can make right now, and I don't want to be the person criticized for laying an egg against Conor McGregor.
He's not going to do what Charles did, for sure.
For sure, not going to grapple. But
Yeah.
but if he decides to take the kicks out as well, Conor hasn't been kicking much in his more recent fights. If Max decides to throw hands, I think it could get very interesting. And I really am leaning on this fight being done by finish. I don't think Max Holloway and Conor are going to go to the judges' scorecards. I think that if it ends early, Conor's going to find some sort of a finish with his hands. And if it ends in rounds 3 or 4, it's going to come from Max Holloway. So it just depends on the styles. I guess maybe it's because I'm a Conor fan, and I'm really optimistic and hopeful that he comes back and doesn't look like Nate Diaz did against Platinum Mike Perry, but comes back and really is trying to prove something to himself and get himself back in line with like fighting and being a competitor in the sport. So I'm going to lean towards Conor McGregor, but
for the striking advantage.
For the striking slightly. But again, it really does depend on what Max Holloway does. But again, I think that Max Holloway is willing to play along a little bit, which could end up being what takes him out of this fight.
Well, I also think before we switch to grappling, I'd like to see, and we don't know what type of stance Conor's going to come out in.
Right.
Because the way that he fought against, for example, like Jose Aldo, Chad Mendez, all of those fights, he was very light on his feet,
Yeah.
wide stance, in and out, in and out. He was hard to time, and then he timed you really well. Think about the Jose knockout. He was practicing that in the back. When somebody comes into his range, he jumps back and boom. And
which is beautiful and actually quite difficult. I'll challenge anybody that's watching. Go out there and do a little bit of shadow boxing and throw your jab and then jump backwards. But as you jump backwards, don't wait till you land to throw the two. Throw the two as you jump backwards. It's a very awkward feel in your body. It's not something that everybody in the UFC would think to do. Conor knew exactly what he should have done in that moment against Jose. That's why he had the 13-second KO. But it's actually really interesting to see how high Conor's fight IQ is, because if you can think of those kind of things and not only see them but act on them within 13 seconds of a fight, you're talking about somebody with a very high fight IQ. So that's just to add to your point.
Yeah, and well, so I guess the point is that the stance that he's going to come out in, is he going to be light on his feet, or is it going to be like Conor from the Dustin Poirier, where we see a very heavy stance in the lead leg, a
Stagnant,
little bit, yes,
high guard,
moving slower and throwing big punches,
Right.
And so I think that would not be the best thing to do against Max, because Max
No.
is very quick and he moves a lot. If you're a stationary target for Max with the volume machine that he is, that could be problematic. I think we need light on his feet, Conor.
Yeah, and I would assume that the best thing Conor could do would be to try to match Max Holloway's volume, especially in rounds 1 and 2. If he can sort of go out there and show volume like Max shows, that can rope Max into a firefight. And Max is always down, right? He didn't get the BMF title. He didn't get the accolades that he has from this sport by not being the guy that points down and is willing to trade, right? So Max is down to get into the fire and really mix it up with somebody. But if Conor can disguise the power within the volume, right? Throw the shots, let Max feel comfortable planting his feet and standing in the pocket with you, and then put the power shots somewhere in those combinations. Just the same way that you feint. Yes, a feint at the beginning of a combination works really well, but if you can throw a couple shots and then feint, now you've got your guy frozen even more so, and he's not able to pick up on the read quite as well as if you were to just throw a feint right before you start a combination, right? Guys are so good with their eyes. They see the feint, now they've picked up on it. But if you land a couple of shots or you put some live rounds and they're blocking them like this and then you feint, they're shelling up. Now their vision's impaired because they've got their hands up, and that's when more targets and more opportunities will open. So I think actually trying to match Max Holloway's volume is very important for Conor McGregor early on. Now, I don't think that Conor McGregor will be able to keep that pace like Max Holloway does for a full 25 minutes. So he'd have to modify. But the first 10 minutes, I would say match Max Holloway's volume.
Yeah, solid. And so let's move into the grappling. And quick break in the action, guys, to thank today's sponsor, Kalshi, the predictions markets where you can trade on real-world events, including MMA fights. And what Nick and I love most about Kalshi is that the lines move based on what you guys, the fans and the experts, think is going to happen, and they're not affected by online bookies. And as a special thank you to the Barnhill Brothers listeners, Kalshi is giving you $20 to predict with once you download the app, use the promo code Barnhill, and deposit $20 of your own. So if you think you know MMA ball, stop talking about it and put a little skin in the game with Kalshi. Thanks so much to them for being today's sponsor. Back to the video. While I don't think this is going to be much of a grappling fight, I do think that it's a topic that we always do and look at with these deep dives. And I don't think we can just brush over it and say there's going to be no grappling in this fight, because there are some things like what my mind immediately went to, and I'm going to go with on the feet grappling first, because, you know, over under 50-50 position where you have one underhook on your opponent and your opponent has one underhook on you, sort of the, you know, clinch, if you want to call it that, the pummel position. Conor had that position with Cowboy and landed some pretty devastating, you know, lead shoulders.
He's an innovator.
It speaks to his creativity, right? And, you know, Max Holloway is a smaller framed guy, especially for 170. Can Conor sort of use his strength and power in those scenarios to do something like, you know, get to the cage and maybe, you know, throw some shoulder strikes or go to a full plumb and throw some knees, things of that nature. So that's something I think when I'm thinking about grappling, I'm thinking more along those lines. And then like when I think about like on the ground grappling, where when you think of MMA grappling, you think of two guys on the ground.
Scrambling and whatnot.
That's probably going to come if somebody gets a knockdown.
Right.
I don't see either one of these guys shooting for a takedown.
No.
Max Holloway, especially with a bad taste in his mouth after last fight, has no desire to have any part of this Conor McGregor fight happen on the ground.
Right.
And Conor McGregor is not the guy who goes across the cage and takes you down. Conor McGregor wins fights with his left hand.
The only time we saw Conor McGregor shoot was after Nate Diaz started to rock him, and then, oh, you're a wrestler now.
Yeah.
And that's when that whole thing became a thing. So, yeah, Conor McGregor is not looking to shoot unless he's really hurt and needs to try to conserve some energy. So I think Max Holloway and Conor will wind up largely, if they do grapple at all, it'll be more cage work. And I would actually sort of advise Conor McGregor to invite that and try to get those opportunities. Of course, Max is an elusive guy. He loves to move around the cage, use every square inch, stick and move behind his jab. When the opportunities are there, then he'll lay in with a voluminous combo. But I honestly think that the fact that Conor's a little bit more used to the big frame and Max isn't, we may see something like Alex Pereira where he simply gains too much weight, and now one of his best weapons, which are his wheels, he's not able to move as fast. He's not as agile. And the best way to drain somebody is to tie up with them. Isometric holds from grappling, and the way you have to really grit it out and utilize every little muscle fiber when you're grappling and doing the clinch work and you're up against the cage doing cage work. That sort of stuff is taxing and exhausting. And I don't think that it would benefit Conor to overdo that, but I think making a 170 Max Holloway carry your weight a little bit could end up slowing his legs down. And if we can do just a little bit of that and take a little bit of Max Holloway's footwork ability out of the equation, now you've bettered your chances at landing your big shots. When you dismount and disengage, get a clean break, find some stuff, and there's opportunities to now attack Max Holloway when his legs aren't quite as fresh. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't see a whole lot of grappling taking place in this fight, but what I do think is Conor McGregor is going to try to trap Max Holloway. Eventually, he's going to wind up getting him close enough to the cage to try to wear on him, and that's probably the means to an end as far as grappling is concerned. I think Conor McGregor would be the one to initiate the grappling. I don't think Max Holloway is going to look to do much of that.
So if somebody shoots for a double leg, single leg, high crotch, or inside outside leg trip, any of the number of ways you would initiate a takedown inside of the MMA rule set,
in the traditional sense,
more likely that Conor shoots the takedown or Max shoots the takedown?
I think Conor, and really it's going to be if he gets hit by something he doesn't like and starts to fatigue, that's when he might look to do it. I mean, we saw it against Nate Diaz. He didn't like some of those shots landing flush on his face, so he shot in. And the beginning of the end was sort of him shooting in on Nate Diaz, the black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Everybody knows how that ended with a submission victory. But I think that Conor will try to keep this on the feet and stay poised and controlled and not look for those opportunities. But if he does get rocked by Max Holloway, I could see him shooting. Max just doesn't really have it in him. We've seen Max hit by many great punchers in this world, and he's really never shot. He's never been like, oh man, I'm so rocked and dazed, let me get a takedown. He usually uses the perimeter of the cage to try to regain his consciousness or regain his ability to think clearly and set his sights on his targets.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I think if somebody shoots a takedown, it's going to be Conor.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I guess we got to give the grappling advantage to Conor because of the pummeling, the strength, the size, his ability to throw the shoulder strikes, and just more likely to use grappling. We got to go Conor, right? Having the advantage there.
Well, here's my thing. I think that the more likely person to initiate the grappling is Conor McGregor, but I don't want to give him the advantage on the grappling because we've seen great takedown defense from Max Holloway. Not so much in the Charles Oliveira fight, but in the past, we have certainly seen Max Holloway do a really good job of sprawling on people that want to take him to the ground. They've had simply too much on the feet, the volume, they can't manage it, they don't want to deal with it, and he's able to avoid all that. So I'm actually going to give Max Holloway the grappling advantage, but more from the defensive perspective, because I don't think either guy is a specialist as far as grappling and takedowns are concerned, and Conor McGregor would likely only shoot out of desperation. So if he shoots out of desperation, I think Max will be able to do a hip bump, sprawl out, make him fall down, and then basically just stand up, get up out of the way, and force Conor to get back up to his feet as well.
Yeah. So it's funny because you gave the striking advantage to Conor and I gave it to Max, and then we're kind of flip-flopped here because I do think that Conor has the grappling advantage. I think that he's going to be stronger against the cage. I do think Max is going to be physically weaker than Conor, because I think Conor, number one, he was always kind of a strong, muscular guy, even at 55. And Max at 55 has not shown us much in the way of, really being physically imposing, right? Except for the Justin Gaethje knockout. But that was the last 10 second sort of thing where they both obliged to just, throw down.
And it was all about volume for the first 24 minutes and 59 seconds of that fight, right? It was, or 50 seconds of that fight. It was all about volume and moving and staying away from Justin and picking your shot. So, yeah, I don't think that giving Conor McGregor the advantage on the ground is the wrong thing. I just don't think we're going to see it that much. I think we're going to see it up against the cage a little bit. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. But I predict most likely we're going to see these guys strike and stand and trade with one another for as long as this lasts.
Cool. Well, let's go into intangibles. And
this is an interesting aspect for sure.
Probably the most interesting aspect of this whole conversation.
Yeah. And with the biggest question marks as well.
Yeah. We haven't seen Conor McGregor fight in over 5 years.
Sure.
And he's on a losing streak. And that's pretty much why Kalshi has him at just about 35% chance to win this fight.
Right.
Although I will say the numbers are starting to creep in Conor's favor. He didn't start at 35. He started at about 30. And I think the nostalgia and some of these training videos that he's putting out is kind of tipping the scales a little bit, to say the least.
And you know me, I'm going to keep my eyes on the line because Conor McGregor is the underdog, right? And I like to look for underdogs that are good starters. Conor McGregor is one of the best starters in the sport.
Yeah.
Even still, like, we don't see guys that are just able to. You go look at his last, several fights. Everything's ending in the first or second round, whether he wins or loses. But he starts really well in the fight. And if he has a decent first round, you could see those lines start to shift a little bit, which could make things very interesting. So I'm going to keep my eye on that for sure.
That's going to be an interesting one to watch for sure. The line movement on that one's probably going to be insane. Yeah. But talking about the intangibles, obviously Conor, 5 years off, broken leg, steel in his leg, on again, off again with dedication. He admitted that on Ariel Helwani. I've had periods of complete lack of dedication, but I'm back focused again. Max Holloway has been, the entire time that Conor was off, a tried and true company man who fights often, always shows up to put on a show, shows up on the big stage. Now he's on a 2-fight losing streak.
And I'll add to your point, Conor McGregor said that is actually a negative for Max. He goes, he's been fighting and taking rounds and going through wars for all these years, and I've been healthy. I've been relaxing for 5 years. Now, I don't think,
depends on how you look at it, right?
I don't think that starting 2 alcohol businesses and doing all the things that Conor McGregor has done in those 5 years would be grounds for relaxing and recovering, because that's just simply not the case. And I would never give an advantage to a guy that has not been competing versus a guy who not only has been competing, but winning belts and doing really just fine in multiple divisions since Conor's not been fighting. But I think that was an interesting point that Conor says. I think that Max Holloway's been too active. As a matter of fact, he's had 7 fights since I had my last fight. And I think that that's going to weigh on him a little bit.
Yeah, it's possible. Max is still a young man.
Yeah.
He was like Robert Whittaker, right? He was such a young champion that even though he's no longer the champion, he's still kind of age-wise in his prime, even though if his body may have more mileage on it than most people his age. The biggest intangible for Max, for me in this fight, is Max Holloway was always the guy that was like, you can't knock me out. You can't take me down.
Right.
I've got a chin on me. I've never even been sat down in this organization, and I've got good takedown defense. So pack a lunch, because I'm going to hit you with 8, 9, 10 significant strikes per minute. And I'm not going to do you the privilege of knocking you out with one shot. I'm going to bludgeon you for 25 minutes. And now you look at Max's last 2 fights. What are the 2 things he always said? You can't take me down. You can't knock me out.
Yeah.
Well, we saw what happened against Charles. He didn't do anything but get taken down. And then we saw what Ilya did to him, which is to knock him out.
Right.
Now, was that because he went back to 145 too fast? Maybe. There's a real case to be made for that. But at the same time, I'm thinking about it from a mental perspective.
Yeah.
When you really truly believe that you can't get knocked out and that you can't be taken down, you fight with a different swag.
Yeah.
And when your last 2 fights you've been dominated in, you tend to kind of lose that swag.
Right.
And Conor's got all the motion coming back, right? Because nobody's expecting shit from Conor.
Right.
It's like this guy was out partying for the last 5 years. He's worth $200 million, and
popped out a handful of kids.
He's coming back to have a good time. He says he's dedicated, but I'm going to watch this for the nostalgia factor. I'm going to turn on the TV and watch my favorite fighter that got me into watching the UFC fight, but I'm not expecting anything from him. So in a lot of ways, if Max loses this fight, he's dropped 3 in a row.
Crazy.
And it's acceptable to lose to Charles and to Ilya. Not really acceptable to lose to a past his prime, 5 years removed, broken leg Conor McGregor.
Sure.
So I feel like the pressure here is squarely on Holloway.
Yeah.
He has to win this fight if he wants to stay in the top of the discussion and that's the beautiful thing too. He can fight Justin Gaethje very easily with a win here,
right?
Because he's got a win over Justin, and now Justin's the belt holder. So the pressure is mounting for Blessed, in my opinion. Not that Conor doesn't have any pressure, but I feel like the biggest X factor in this one, so my biggest intangible, is the amount of pressure that Max Holloway has to win a fight.
Yeah, my main intangible is actually on the mental side as well. What Conor McGregor is going to come out, and is he mentally ready to go endure another war against a guy like Max Holloway, who is very well versed, even recently, in going into wars. So if Conor McGregor can go out there and perform like he used to, even if he's not skill for skill and quite as agile as he used to be, if he's not at that level, but he still has that grit and determination to pick his shots and be precise and, have a game plan with John Kavanagh on the team. If they can see shots, obviously we've seen him dismantle opponents back in his prime, and he was able to do that with solid game planning, really good execution of good techniques. And if he can do that, that is going to be really eye-opening for the Conor McGregor fans out there that just want to see him fight one more time, but ultimately get a win. And, but the mental side is what is very interesting to me, because Conor McGregor feels a little bit like Arman Sarukian to me. Neither of these guys need to fight. And I don't think Conor McGregor was ever really, about 2 or 3 years ago, really looking to fight. There was those rumors where he was like, I'm going to come back and the UFC's holding me back. I don't think he was mentally ready to actually come back.
You mean from like a money perspective, him and Arman don't need to fight? Because they're wealthy. That's what you're basically saying.
Correct. Yeah. Arman is like, I got to prove it to myself. I got to prove that I can be the best in the world. I don't need the money from fighting. I'm making peanuts compared to what my family's worth. And, I'm now doing this social media. He's probably making more on social media than he does when he steps into the octagon. So Arman doesn't need to, but he's doing it for himself. He's doing it for personal reasons. Conor McGregor didn't need to come back. He's made a boatload of money, more than anybody else in this sport, but something brought him back. It lit a fire in him. It made him say, you know what, I got to get back there and compete. And I just hope that what he is feeling outside of the cage can exist in the cage. If it can, then we'll see an interesting, fun fight. But if he starts to deal with a little adversity and just folds and goes, you know what, God, I forgot how hard this damn sport is. I forgot how brutal this game is. Let me find my way out. Then, of course, it's going to be a short night for Conor McGregor. But if he is truly as hungry as he's saying he is, which I tend to believe Conor, right? He's always been the Mystic Mac. He says things and then they come to life. And when, body language says a lot. But you can listen to what somebody's saying, and sometimes they're a good actor, right? He was in Roadhouse, so I guess he's a decent actor. But you can start to...
I think Jake carried that movie, but whatever.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal. That was more his role. But you can sort of weed out what's real and what's not. But any interview that I've watched of Conor from recent times, the Ariel Helwani interview, the stuff he's done with CBS Sports and Paramount, he looks actually like he believes the words he's saying, and the body language, moreover. Like, it feels like that fire is back in him, and it's not lip service. He's not just trying to tell us that, basically to sell a fight. Like, no, trust me, I'm back. Don't worry about that. And then it comes back and he's just a shell of himself. I truly think Conor has something to prove, not only to the fans and the UFC, but to himself. So I really think that the intangibles here, it could go either way. That was the one for Conor McGregor. And do you have any for Conor?
No, well, so for Conor, I think it was just, the leg. How's the leg going to hold up? He's got a steel plate in the leg. If when he rips that kick, what's going to happen?
Right.
That's always a concern. Number two is, just... We've never seen 37, almost 30. I think Conor's birthday is in September, if memory serves me. So he's almost 38. Him and I were born in the same year. That's That's how I know that so easily. But I can't spout off every age of every fighter. But Conor and I are born in the same year. So the biggest thing is, what does a past his prime Conor McGregor look like? Because even when he fought Dustin, that was 5 years ago, he was 33.
Right.
And everything before that, he was squarely within his prime. 33 is still also squarely within your prime years.
Right.
So we've actually never seen a past his prime Conor McGregor as far as age is concerned. Now, is 5 years removed from the sport where you haven't been sparring, haven't been taking damage? in allowing your body to fully heal itself? Does that allow you to, maybe push off the end of your prime? It's very possible, because we've seen fighters at 40. I mean, think Alex Pereira's 38, up until recently against Gane, he looked fantastic.
Yeah.
And, even getting his win back against Magomed Ankalaev at 37 years old. So there's a lot of ways that you can extend your prime. Is Conor going to come back and show us that, he's still got some gas left in the tank? That's the biggest X factor for me. But I still have to give Conor the intangibles advantage because of the mounted pressure on Max.
Okay.
Max Holloway, as I said, 2-fight losing streak, and it's the way that he lost, right?
Yeah.
The guy that couldn't get knocked out got knocked out. The guy that nobody took down got taken down and manhandled for 5 rounds, and now he's staring down the barrel of 3 losses in a row. And like I said, it's acceptable to lose to Ilya, and it's acceptable to lose to Charles. If you want to be an elite level fighter, it is not acceptable to lose to a 5-year removed Conor McGregor.
Sure.
So the mounted pressure for Max is either going to, like his old foe, Dustin the Diamond Poirier, going to mold him into a diamond, or he's going to fold under the pressure. I think it might be a bit too much pressure-wise, so I'm not going to predict that Conor wins the fight necessarily. We'll do that fight week. We'll do a full main card breakdown, guys. Make sure you come back for that. Usually about midweek on fight week is when we do the full breakdown and predictions of the entire main card. So if you haven't, make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell notification so you don't miss that video. But intangibles wise, I'm giving Conor the advantage because of the mounted pressure on Max.
Yeah, I hear that. And Max Holloway has tons of experience in the sport. We've never really seen him swallowed up by big moments, because even before the Ilya loss and the Charles loss, he had been in many big fights, for years and years, and he never let the pressure get to him. Now, this one does feel a little bit different because of what he's coming off of, right? The loss to Charles Oliveira was eye-opening, because we all thought that he would at least make that competitive. And then after about 2 rounds of Charles controlling the fight, and moreover landing the bigger, more devastating shots, it's like, man, is Max, has Father Time finally caught up with Max? I don't know. But yeah, I think that Max Holloway will be able to deal with the pressure, but I don't know if his mentality will be as rock solid as it once was before those losses. And also, like you said, he lost in those the 2 types of ways that he's always said he's never going to lose, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think Max is the right guy for this fight. I think that the matchmakers did the right thing by giving Conor McGregor a legit badass in Max Holloway, but a guy who could wind up making it a very competitive fight, right? Conor only needs one to change a fight. And at 170, I do think that Max Holloway is going to be slightly slower, which means his legs aren't going to be quite as, sharp under him. He's not going to last as long with that high pressure and cardio that he usually has. And Conor McGregor, like we said, he's a sniper at the end of the day. He's got heavy, heavy hands. He knows he can box well. The one thing that sticks out stylistically and on a technical side is Conor's got great head movement, but he also does leave his head in the fire zone a little bit too much, right? He'll throw a couple shots and slip down. Great head movement, but sometimes he almost admires his work from down there. He'll land a delayed overhand and then sort of stay down there. And a guy like Max Holloway, who throws real quick A to B, real tight punches, will be able to find those shots. So Conor McGregor, his athleticism is an intangible for me, and Max Holloway's mentality, big intangible for me. But I guess we're going to have to see how it plays out. I can't believe we're finally getting a deep dive. It felt to me like after the past 5 years, no Conor McGregor activity, like we were never going to be able to sit down and do a deep dive on Conor McGregor. But look at us now. Right
yeah,
here.
I mean, it's so funny because we started doing these deep dives. What was it? Only about like 6 or 7 months ago.
Yeah.
And we try to do them for the big fights, right? We've had a lot of people ask us to do them for all main events, which I'm happy to do.
Yeah.
I think that people really like these. So, but I'm with you. I was like, I don't think we're ever going to get the chance to do one for Conor.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer, but then sure enough, here we are.
Well,
so
yeah, and not to spoil anything, because I love Max Holloway, but I'm kind of leaning towards hoping that Conor McGregor can win, because if we can do a deep dive on Conor versus Justin Gaethje, which, mark my words, if Conor McGregor does beat Max Holloway, this fight means something at 155, even though it's not taking place
there's
at
no
155.
question about that.
And if he beats Max Holloway come April, when he said his next fight is already booked and set in stone, it's going to be against Justin Gaethje.
There's no question.
It ain't going to be at the White House because we're not going to do the Freedom 251, but it's going to be against Justin Gaethje for that 155 title. Conor's going to have to suck back down to a lean, mean, lightweight fighting machine. But crazier things have happened. This year has been the year for the underdogs. I went with Sean Strickland. Boy, was I off on that. I went with Ilia Topuria. Boy, was I wrong on that. I'm even leaning right now for when August turns around, Ian Gary may be able to shock the world and do something crazy. And if there's one guy that you can always rely on to just flip the script and do something that nobody's ever done, it's Conor McGregor. So even though he's the underdog, I kind of like his chances in this one.
Conor McGregor, when you look at the call sheet numbers, is less of an underdog than Sean Strickland was, and certainly less of an underdog than Justin Gaethje was.
How insane is that?
It's pretty insane, but I mean, look at what's happened. Are we going to go 3 for 3 here?
Right.
I mean, I think Conor's at like plus 200 and something now, and he started less than that. I bet you as fight night approaches, we're going to see some odds move that are, pretty baffling.
Yeah, and Paramount got a whole lot of flack in the first part of this year, but boy, the summer for 2026 has been quite hot, and it's not just like the fights that they're putting on, the matches they're making, and then ultimately the results that we're getting from these matches is insane. So if there's any sort of magic in the air for the underdog to pull up a major upset, I feel like Conor McGregor, being from Ireland, home of the luck of the Irish and everything like that. So I think there could be something to it, but boy, am I excited for this one.
Me too. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Look out for our next one that's going to be coming over the weekend. No fights this weekend, so we're going to do 2 deep dives back to back. The next one will be on the co-main event, Paddy Pimblett versus Benoit Saint-Denis. That is going to drop probably on Sunday or Monday, and then midweek next week, we will get into the full main card predictions, where we're holding our predictions on these deep dives to give those to you midweek next week, as well as all the fights on the main card, rather. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and you feel like we earned it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.
Peace.